I'm glad it's been a good weeks because this is tough.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have hit a nerve.
This is heavy.
It's real. It's raw.
Well, we failed. That's the most important thing you need to know. We failed and Florida's done. It's over and we failed. There's so much more to the story and we're going to get into that in just a minute. The goal was 0 to 3 million in 2 years and we did less than 3 million. We did 2.5 million. Not only that, but we weren't profitable, which I really had hoped to be profitable this year. Even with the gross profit that is more than adequate to be profitable, we were not profitable. We ended up with about a 9% loss instead of a profit. Now, one of the things I know from starting different branches, each one of those locations really took about 3 years to develop. We had to develop the marketing. There's tons of expense going into each location. You have to get that pipeline going. We knew in the very beginning that this is a long haul thing. We weren't short-sighted. We threw a lot more cash at it than you would ever do if you were going to bootstrap a business. And that puts us a little bit behind, but hopefully it sets us up better for the future. This year, we expect a really big turnaround as far as profitability goes. But the bigger news is that in the beginning, I said we failed. And when I say we failed, it means we didn't hit our goals. But even worse than that, the biggest failure was probably the damage it did to our family. And that's why these guys are here, is because I think we need to talk about that. One of the first videos I did during the startup process, we were down at the dock, we were fishing. I rode my scooter down, met the family, they were fishing. Everybody's having fun. And somewhere along the way, I think I know where, we lost the joy.
Somewhere along the way that stopped.
That stopped.
Screeching halt.
1 minute we're having a good time and the next minute we are not having a good time.
I know where it started. I think it started when you really started to go gung-ho with the business.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of your time.
What do you think? Where do you think it went wrong?
I think when you start getting really involved with the company and you start having guys mess stuff up, trailer in the ditch, all that kind of stuff.
Right after the trailer in the ditch was the guys driving stakes through water lines and fighting on job sites and using racial slurs on job sites. Amazingly enough, none of those people still work there. No. But it was all that stress of getting that. That was bad in and of itself, but there was a family event that happened, and I'm not going to talk about that. But there was a family event that happened a little over a year ago that basically I didn't expect and kind of shook me to my core, and I realized that I'm probably still trying to get over that, honestly. You know, you like to say that you're tough and you can handle stuff until everybody says they have a plan until they get punched in the face. That was Mike Tyson said that. Well, I got punched in the face.
And the problem was you were punched in the face, but nobody knew how hard you were punched in the face.
I'm glad it's... I'm glad this is... I'm glad it's been a good week because this is tough. You probably saw it a little bit with the bucket video, but this has been something I didn't expect. I'm not good at emotions, except for anger. That's my emotion, but
you're not even good at that.
I fought for 2 years, hard, really, really hard, and was just tired. Doesn't mean that I was giving up. It meant that I didn't have the drive. You know, in the mornings, I wasn't charged up to get out of bed and go to work. I just wanted to, kind of pretend it didn't exist and hope they would deal without me. So I hadn't been going to the office a whole ton. And that, for me, for somebody that's always been extremely driven, that's tough. Mm-hmm. Because that's what I do. I just go. And I just always have the next idea and I want to get moving on it. And I had ideas. I just didn't want to do anything about them. And you're thinking, hey, this is going on in my business. Just understand that I am somebody that feels that. Like, I know probably more on this one than any other time before. I started 2 other companies basically from scratch, and it was nothing like this. Mm-mm. This is so much different. Like I say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And those differences from one area of the country to another. When they say culture shock, I think that's what they're referring to. You can't put it into words, but yeah. I can see these differences. I didn't realize how different the customers were. I didn't realize that in Wyoming, we can't get people to review us, but in Florida, it's really easy to get reviews. I didn't realize that in Wyoming, everybody uses cash to pay for things and doesn't finance stuff. And in Florida, everybody finances everything. In Wyoming, we don't hire people that don't know how to use drills. In Florida, we hired people that had never run a drill before. Had never done manual labor. Much more demanding customers in Florida. than in Wyoming. It's just two different ways of thinking, just two different cultures between Wyoming, and I didn't account for that. And honestly, I think that there's a ton of people down there in Florida that don't know how to run businesses, and that makes it even worse. Stuff that passes for high quality in Florida would never pass up here. It just wouldn't. So there's all that stuff that happened. Then we had an event last Monday. Some of you guys might have seen that on Instagram and Facebook or wherever you saw it. It seems like it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was a much bigger deal than whoa.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have hit a nerve.
So we had an event last Monday, and even that at the time didn't feel like it was that big a deal. As many of you may know, I was a fireman for 12 years. Being prepared for fires and dealing with fires is something that, it's kind of come second nature. So when we moved into the house in Florida, we put in all the smoke detectors. We did all the stuff. I put in the fire extinguisher in the garage, one in the kitchen. We did all the right things, but I couldn't account for certain things.
The human factor.
And, jeez. Hold on, sorry. Cade was charging some batteries in the garage, and he was trying to revive some of these batteries through methods and means, which I don't know. He was talking about shocking them to life. We went to buy a truck. These batteries were charging on this box, and he decided to plug some batteries in before we left to go buy the truck. Now, Tanya was thinking about coming with us, and that would have left the other two boys at the house. Well, she decided not to come with us, and so Cade and I took off, and he left the batteries on the charger. Gotten maybe part way, so she was talking to me on the phone, and she was getting up out of our room, which is right by the garage, to go investigate a noise she heard. And she opens up the door to the garage and sees this fire that's probably about this big in the middle of our garage. Batteries on fire, they're melted to the plastic floor, those stupid tiles. She screams fire, and she's yelling to the other two boys. The youngest one heard, and then the other one's got his headphones on playing video games and didn't hear anything. She's asking where a fire extinguisher is, and I'm telling her where the fire extinguisher is because I didn't even know where she was. So she gets it, she puts it out, not a big deal, and she gets the batteries out of the garage so that they can't further cause damage. But it was just one of those things where if she would have came with us, that house would have been gone, because neither one of those two boys in their rooms would ever heard anything. And if that door had been shut, she probably would not have heard the pop that she heard to go investigate.
Which it wasn't, it was gapped.
And a lot of times, she would have heard that noise and just been like, it's nothing, something probably fell, something, something Cade did in there, knocked over, whatever. She went and investigated it. If it would have been another 2 minutes, that whole garage would have been on fire, full engulfed.
I literally opened the door when it first started.
So I'm just like, what if any one of these things would have been different, we would have 100% lost the house. No doubt about it. That thing was getting ready to go. Not to mention that this fire was being done over a plastic sink that would have caught on fire, but what was in the sink? Matches. What was under the sink? Fireworks. And it would have just precipitated this great big huge event, and we wouldn't have saved it. Yeah, that was kind of a big deal. And that's kind of what set off the chain of events.
You need to rewind.
Okay.
Because...
Did I forget something?
Well, you forgot to add that Connor and I had a huge heart-to-heart that morning before this whole thing even started. Well, he was in a bad mood, and I'm like, "What is your problem? Is there anything? What can I do to help you?" And he's like, "Well, we can move back to Wyoming." And I'm like, "Buddy, sorry, that's not going to happen." I've noticed before, but I guess this is the first time I really noticed the pain in his eyes when he was talking to me, and that was kind of eye-opening to see, because it's been almost 3 years since we've been there. So anyhow, Connor and I had a huge heart-to-heart. Didn't really come to anything, but I think I tried to make him feel better about it, which I think we did. And then I left and went into my own room, and I sat there, and then it kind of hit me that I'm like, I can really resonate with what he's saying, and I can feel the same feelings. And so I went back in his room, and I'm like, you know what? I said, I hate to tell you, but I feel the same way. Don't worry about it. I'll talk to Dad. We'll figure it out. And I said, never say never. And that was the end of it.
So fast forward to that evening. It was probably 9 o'clock at night. Cade was gone. The other two boys were doing whatever they're doing at that particular time. And Tanya and I are sitting in bed, and I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden, I've never felt this before, just this crushing anxiety over my own mortality. So I'm just sitting there, and Tanya looks over at me and says, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "No."
Because he was breathing very deep. And his eyes were wide, and I'm like, "Are you okay?"
Never had that happen before, but I said, "I think I'm having some sort of anxiety or panic attack." She's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I just feel like I'm dying. I feel like I'm on the verge of death, and the only thing left to do is make sure you guys are taken care of, because I'm going to be dead." So then she really helped me out. And she's like, well, I have something to say and I don't want you to respond. I'm like, could we focus on me for just a second? But no, that was not an option at this point in time. So she said, okay, well, I said, I think I know what you're going to say. She said, no, you don't know what I'm going to say. So then she starts, I want to move back to Wyoming. And she goes on some 5-minute diatribe while I just sit there basically speechless, and because she just wanted me to listen. So she gets done and she said, so what do you think of all that? And I said, well, I only have one word. Okay. Mm-hmm. So in that video that we took, one of the things I said in there is that there's no price you can put on family. And I meant it. It got me to thinking, and one of the things I was considering is moving to a different location, because what I could tell just from even having a talk with Cade is that we missed all the stuff that we could do here, because we have all this land here that they can go be boys, and that's the way they were raised. They were raised to go do things and be outside and, you know, screwing stuff up. And in Florida, we couldn't do any of that. We just didn't feel like it was an environment that they were suited to. Looking back, we saw all the pain and we saw how they were regressing. They used to be outside. They used to go do things. And now we're inside, they're inside. We're all just kind of, when you're in it, you don't see it. But then now I'm like, we could see that we were all in pain.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Tanya didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to leave the house. The kids didn't want to leave the house. It's just everything that was combined. Like building the pool was stressful. The whole thing, you know, the lawsuits, all the other lawsuit we've got going on, all that stuff just weighs on you. And eventually it just comes crashing down and you realize that, you know, you think you got the shoulders to bear all this stuff and you don't. And I think that's where I was. I think it's important to say that there's been some very defining moments in our marriage, and it's never been a question of us not being on the same page, one wanting something the other one didn't want. So moving to St. Augustine was very much like that. We both said, hey, we think this is going to be a great thing. We're going to do it. Maybe I wasn't actively thinking that I was going to move back to Wyoming, but it didn't shock me like it probably should have. Like say, anything for the family. And so we were very much on the same page again, or that, you know, these things could have wrecked a marriage. Easily wrecked a marriage. Something like this. We went through the bankruptcy and that didn't faze us at all. We went through my alcoholism. More on that in just a second. We decided that we'd move back and we sat the kids all down.
Cade, what did you think when we called you into the...
Oh, I thought I was pretty much going to get a lecture on not charging batteries and what we should do. Like maybe like a fire plan, like where the fire extinguishers are, or fire escape plan or something like that.
And honestly, I don't even know how it started.
It started, you sat everybody down and you're like, I think we need to move back to Wyoming. That was not what I was expecting.
Give us your take on that meeting.
It was a pretty emotional meeting, you know. It's hard watching your father cry.
How many times have you seen me do that?
I think that was probably the first like really in-depth emotions showing. I don't know how to put that better, but
I'm not big on that.
Yep. And then you started asking around like how everybody felt about it and explained like how you thought it was damaging the family, and each of us got to share our own take on what we thought and made the decision.
That's it. Oh, no, that's not it. Okay. So I mentioned that there was a family event, the scar that left on me. And so we took a trip to Cabo last December and still remember the place. And we were sitting down, we were having breakfast, and Tanya and I just decided we were going to have a mimosa. You know how long it's been since I drank before that? And that might not seem like a big deal, but it was a huge deal. Looking back, I realized that I was using that as a crutch. And so not that anything got completely out of hand. There wasn't any of the stuff that I did back when I had the alcohol issue. It was very much reasonable, but I never would have done that if I wasn't masking not only the event that happened in our family, but all the other pain that came from that first year in business with all the other things that I fought. I had not drank any alcohol since June 17th of 2007 and broke my sobriety, something I never thought I'd do. Not that I ever abused it, but I could just feel that it wasn't good for my health. I even did research on YouTube and found out that there's a podcast from a doctor and neuroscience, I don't know. So he's a smart guy. I'll drop a link to that video down here, but what he talked about, there's no safe level of alcohol. It's all poison. And he's right. And I could just feel the toll that it was taking on my body. Not only was I struggling emotionally, but then adding the alcohol to it to help mask that and realize that's not who I am. That's not what I want. And looked back, and The 2 years prior to moving to Florida were some of the happiest years of my life. I was joyous and happy, and everybody said, you're so much fun. And then I moved to Florida, and I look back and I'm like, this is not who I want to be. I'm always going to be hard charging. I'm always going to be very much eye for an eye, but that was different than this. This was worse. And I was cynical, and it was not what I wanted to be. The best thing to do when you realize that you've messed up is unmess it up. So that's what we did, is we unmessed it up. With that said, last Monday marked the first day of my new sobriety. So yay, go me. Because I don't want to be that guy anymore. Don't get me wrong. I was not the guy that I was in 2007. No, but had we stayed there, I could see it being, it was
a start of something that could have ended
and so,
like that.
Again, the best thing to do is when you notice a problem, fix it. If I know what you're thinking, okay, so enough about all that stuff. What's going to happen with Florida? Well, those of you that know, one of the things I've used to define success for myself is that I wanted to build a business that survived without me. And Wyoming proved that they could do that. Now Florida gets to do that. That very Monday that all this happened was the first day that we had another husband-wife couple come to work with us in the Florida operation. So we just brought Chris and Jeannie on, but Amber's the GM and Jeremy's head of sales, and Jason's in charge of all the welding and fabrication, the shop stuff. Troy's in charge of inventory, and Brian's in charge of operations. And Clay is my rock star trainer. So anybody that starts there gets trained by Clay, and they have a great idea how to build the best fence in St. Augustine. We have the right team in place now, which we have never had before. And that's what led me to feel like I could actually pull away from this and not have to shut it down. Had we not had that in place, I would have sold everything and just been done with it. So when I say Florida, we failed at some of the critical numbers if you're just a numbers person, but one of the things we succeeded on is that we put one of the best teams together that I think anybody could ask for in 2 years. So I know that our customers are taken care of, I know that our team members are taken care of, and I know that that business will survive. Mark my words, I will give you updates. Getting Florida up off the ground ultimately is going to be a big blessing to our company. We have some huge plans at SWI, and Florida is very much a big part of that plan. And I can't say a whole lot about that and what that plan is, but you'll see.
It's gonna be huge.
It's $100 million or bust. Anyhow, we make the decision on Wednesday. So this all happened Monday, and Wednesday we packed everything up, all our personal belongings, threw it on a trailer, and Cade and I started driving. The other three flew out Thursday morning, and that's the end of Florida for the Olsons. Not for the rest of the team, but just for the Olsons. Because we decided that once you make a decision, why delay it?
Can we also just mention that when the bucket video came out, I remember you came to me and you're like, the only thing I want to do is YouTube. I want to do YouTube. I want more YouTube. YouTube brings me joy. I enjoy it. It's my passion.
And the YouTube, my editor, Nick, the guy sitting here thinking, oh, wow, so Mark lives in Wyoming now. So as you watch this story happen, Nick is learning all of this stuff. He didn't know any of it. So I'm curious. Nick, what do you think about all this?
I'm surprised.
Yeah, Nick, he says he's surprised. I promised Nick 5 days a month minimum. I think we can do better than that for YouTube, because ultimately what I want to do is bring great content, not only to the Successful Contractor family, but to the viewers on our SWI channel. We'll be able to execute much better. And that's exciting to me. That's one of the things I'm excited about. Not the only thing I'm excited about, but we have three really big things. YouTube stuff, and then two other things that we're not talking about right now. I think it's also important to note that when we look back on this time in 5 years' time, I think that there's going to be parts of that we're going to see were necessary to get to where we are. So I don't think it was a total waste. Yeah, it's there's a part of me that feels like this is a failure, and there's a part of me that feels like this is a win too. So no delays here. We live in Wyoming, and we're going to be happy. And it's cold, and I hate the cold. I hate the cold so much. I hate the wind so much, but I love my family. That's not all I have to say. That's all I'm going to say. Until next time, I hope you guys have a good dang day, because for us, the future looks pretty bright.